It's out on Steam for just £5.99 and runs really well on pretty much any modern setup. Well, that aged well. Game preservation is something that I hold near and dear to my heart. As someone who's been playing games for almost 30 years now, I've seen so many games that fall by the wayside, never to get mentioned or re-released, forever falling into the depths of obscurity. And, unlike books or films, if you want the authentic experience in most of these games, you need to fork out money not just for the game, but also the hardware to play it on. And let's not even get started on if your TV can even play the old consoles, since older consoles weren't around when HDMI became the standard. So, more often than not, if you want to play older consoles like the Sega Saturn, you need to find a TV that has an AV output, or spend money on one of those dongles that convert the video output to HDMI. Either way, the whole process is needlessly complicated. However, this whole issue is sidestepped when companies re-release their older catalogue to newer consoles, giving these games a new lease of life, and honestly, it's great to see. More people need to experience games like Tombi, the original Tomb Raiders, or the classic Sonic Adventure games. However, there are times where, even though the game's out on storefronts digitally, it's taken down for seemingly no reason. During the month of November 2024, Sega announced that they are delisting 74 of their retro games from digital storefronts. 74 games that showcase Sega's history, from the Mega Drive, or Genesis depending on where you are, to the Dreamcast. Gone. Just like that. With no other way to buy them outside paying stupid prices for a key reseller, or by paying stupid prices for an eBay listing. Either way, this makes the consumer out of pocket. Sure, you could say that, you snooze you lose, if you wanted them before you should have bought them. But to that, I have to disagree. It is always unfortunate when games have to go due to issues such as licensing or running cost, and no one wins in this situation. Earlier this year, I made a video about Night into Dreams, a Sega Saturn classic that could have been bought as part of the Sega Heritage Collection, which were a bunch of games sold digitally on the Xbox Store and Steam. However, that video is now outdated because of this. There is no way to buy what is, in my eyes, one of Sonic Team's strongest games, and that is a downright travesty. It's not just Sega that have done this year. Several companies delist games all the time. Good Old Games have been asked to delist Warcraft 1 and 2 from their stores from Blizzard, probably to try and push more people to buy the new Battle Chest version with the remastered games on there. At least with those games you can still buy the original versions on Battle.net, but it still sucks to see that there's less consumer choice in regards to where you buy the game from. Activision delisted several Transformer games, some of which are noted as being some of the best in the franchise, but because of licensing issues, they had to get rid of them. Nintendo themselves released Mario 3D All-Stars, a collection of 3D Mario games, only to delist them after a year of release. And this was the first and only time Super Mario Sunshine ever saw a re-release. And that wasn't even due to licensing issues, they just wanted more people to buy the thing, so they slept on the time limit. If you can't tell by looking at my channel, I'm a big fan of retro gaming. There are loads of games from that era that I think deserve a larger fan following. However, because of games preservation being as poor as it is, most of these games probably will never see another re-release. And it's not just older games that get delisted, newer games are facing the same issues as well. Forza Horizon 4 is getting delisted on the 15th of December due to several car licenses expiring, and that game is only 6 years old. The Crew is a pretty well known one at the moment due to Ubisoft's behaviour around shutting down the servers. They even went out of their way to ensure that no one can play their game. They wouldn't even look into making an offline patch for it, they just took your money and told you to go away, which is disgusting behaviour. At least with Forza you can still play the damn game, but with the Crew you get nothing. And this is only going to get worse with the rise of games as a service. As more and more games lose their player base due to something new coming out, they too will shut their game down, forever damning it to nothing more but a distant memory. A non-racing example of this would be Little Big Planet 3. That got delisted on the month of October 2024, and even if you bought the game before it got delisted, there's no way to play the custom maps, as the server that was holding them got taken offline. All those custom made levels from the community gone just like that. 10 years of artistic expression from a dedicated fan base snapped out of existence. It's honestly really sad to see. Think about all these games that you play now, and just think about how many of them will still be around in another 10 years. Would you still be able to play your current favourite game, or will it be in a state which will make it unusable? All those hours you spent grinding for gear, unlocking achievements, playing with friends could be gone just like that, and you won't be able to do anything about it. Some games get delisted because newer releases are due to come out, forcing players to pay more for a newer release instead of giving people the option to buy a cheaper version. Sonic Generations is one example of this. When Shadow Cross Sonic Generations came out, the original one got delisted from Steam, and the only way to buy it was by buying this Sonic Games Collection bundle. And while it's great that there's still an option to buy the older version, the fact that it's locked behind a more expensive package if you're only after that one game basically punishes you for being curious. Sure, the newer version is fantastic. The shadow parts are pretty much peak Sonic in terms of writing and gameplay. However, if you want to see what the original was like and play it with the unchanged script, well, then you have to buy the collection. An infamous example of this is the Warcraft 3 Reforged fiasco, where Blizzard basically deleted the old game out of existence on Battle.net. So not only were you stuck with an inferior version of a classic game, you couldn't even play the classic game. However, while companies are letting these games die, fans have been working overtime to preserve these games, getting them working on modern PCs, and it's great to see. Outrun 2 Coast to Coast is a fantastic arcade racing game made by Sumo Digital. It perfectly captures the original arcadey feel and slaps on some new things on it as well to make it, in my eyes, the perfect Outrun game. Unfortunately, this game, along with the online arcade counterpart on PSN and Xbox Live, got delisted due to Sega's license with Ferrari expiring, and it has never seen a re-release since. Now, I'm no game developer, but honestly, if they could just remove the Ferrari cars and replace them with a standard red fast car, I would be happy. I play Outrun for the gameplay, not for the Ferrari license. And along with that, this would also get rid of the issue with the Ferrari license. However, thanks to some die-hard fans, the game is brought back to a working state on modern PCs. Hell, you can even play it on the Steam Deck. It is amazing on the deck. It's a great on-the-go racing game. And all this was done out of passion. No monetary gain, nothing is locked behind a paywall. The team just made this so people can play a game that they love. Another game that is working only thanks to fan support is Black and White, a fantastic god simulator that was released by the late and great Lionhead. Thanks to fan patches, the game has a whole new lease of life. Without patches, the game won't even run on Windows 10. However, thanks to fan support, you can now play this classic from 2001. Oh my god, the game's over 20 years old. And you should. There's nothing quite like it. The fans even got the sequel working. A more modern game that saw this treatment from fans is Battleborn, Gearbox's failed MOBA shooter thing, with fans making their own private servers so they could still play the game that they invested so much time into, breathing new life into it. While companies are constantly dropping the ball, taking their user base for granted, fans themselves are being the change that they want to see. Want to play Phantasy Star Online, one of the best MMOs ever made? Sure, just load up one of the several custom servers and off you go. Want to play Sonic 06 in an objectively better state than release? Now you can, in the form of a ground-up remake made by a fan. How about the original Silent Hill 2? Fans even got that PC port working on both PC and now the Steam Deck. How about the best game ever made, Sonic R? Thanks to some die-hard fans, the game's running better than ever, with some fan-made patches to help make the game run on modern systems. Even on Steam Deck. This game is immortal, it'll never die. Fans have been constantly picking up the slack, fixing games, making abandonware playable, sorting through the mess left behind by these big companies, all for the love of the medium. And that's not even mentioning how important the emulation scene is, helping keeping old consoles that would otherwise be left to dust to thrive. Nintendo seemed to be at war with emulation with its takedown of the Yuzu emulator early this year, which in turn took out Citrus, a 3DS emulator. Which makes no sense as Nintendo took down the 3DS store early in the year, meaning that there's no current way for them to make any money off the damn console. So taking down an emulator of it just seems overly antagonistic. And thanks to some diehard fans, some games are even getting full-on translations. One big example of a game getting a second wind due to fan translation is Racing Lagoon. That game was all over my YouTube feed once the fan translation got released. People finally playing what is one of Square's craziest games. Sakura Wars is another game that got the fan translation treatment, one of those Sega Saturn games that was just in Japan. And it's a fantastic game to play through as well, mixing the visual novel and strategy RPG gameplay loops really well. And these are just two examples. There are loads of games that got this treatment. Honestly, it deserves its own video at some point. Despite what you may think about emulation, it is an important cornerstone for games preservation. Some games would not be playable without it. Panzer Dragoon Saga, one of the best RPGs ever made, is a staggering £600 on eBay. None of that money is going to the devs, none of that money is going to Sega, that's just going to someone's pocket. Why should you pay £600 to have the privilege to play this game? Enemy Zero, a game I covered earlier, is similar. That's costing around about £100 to buy. If you want to experience the games more often than not, you'll need to resort to emulation. And the fact that some companies are trying to smother this out is just anti-consumer. If there is no legal way to buy the game from the source directly, then emulation, in my eyes, is a perfectly acceptable way to experience the game. And people think otherwise are honestly not looking at the bigger picture here. Older consoles themselves are decaying, either due to disk drives failing to read discs, cartridges failing to load, and old faulty capacitors leaking all over the insides, like what plagues a lot of the original Xbox models. You can't even play your PSP without risking turning your house into a bomb site due to the lithium batteries expanding and becoming unstable. Imagine just loading it up to play some Crisis Core and then... Unless you know what you're doing, or know somebody who does, there will be a time where you won't even be able to play these old games on original hardware unless you spend even more money on a refurbished console or fix it yourself, locking these older games out of a player base even more. Without people drumming up support for these old games through emulation, re-releases would not be a bigger thing as they are now, because if no one's talking about these older games, why would companies ever think to re-release them? If fans were not making games run, either through fan patches or emulations, they are trying to lobby together to make some of these big companies actually care about the games they make. Like what the Stop Killing Games initiative are doing, trying to pass legislation in the EU that will put an end to things like what Ubisoft's doing with The Crew. Originally, I wasn't going to make this video, however, the more I thought about this, the more annoyed I got. I love this medium, there's nothing quite like it. I've played games that have made me sad, made me laugh, and everything in between. Games that have stayed with me, games that, when I am down, I will play a sort of comfort. I've met people, maintained friendships, and deepened bonds through this medium. At the end of the day, part of my very core is rooted in video games. How can I say that I love this medium if I don't speak out against what is going on in the space? Don't get me wrong, I'm not expecting this video to change anyone's mind about this. This is just me trying to say that if you do not like what's going on, it's okay. There are ways you can help stop this. You can sign petitions to get your voice heard, and if you're coding savvy, you can help efforts to bring these older games back to life. And if you like to talk, you can make videos expressing your displeasure of what's going on, and trying to get people at the ESA to actually take notice of what's going on, which is important because the ESA went out of their way to stop archiving of older games happening this year. These games might be used for recreational purposes, as if that's a bad thing. They're video games. What do you expect? The thing is, this is allowed for films, books, and the like, but for some reason, for games alone, this isn't allowed. And when you take into account that 87% of classic games counted as critically endangered, an archive would help keep those from being lost forever. But no, you have to make sure the shareholders are happy, art being at risk of being forever lost be damned. However, it's not all doom and gloom. There are some companies that do help keep games preservation alive. Xbox have a great backwards compatible catalogue, with games from both the original and the 360 era playable on the Xbox One and Series consoles. And on top of that, they even have enhanced features like a higher frame rate. Hell, it's currently the only console that can play Sonic Unleashed without the game turning into a PowerPoint presentation. They play straight from disc as well, which is fantastic. Unfortunately though, not all the games are playable, and some games that are playable cannot be brought online due to, yet again, licensing issues. Sony themselves are also picking up on this. However, their way of doing it is very different from Microsoft's. There's no way to play PS1 and PS2 discs on the PS4 or PS5. However, you can buy some of these titles digitally, which may not seem as user-friendly as Microsoft's way of doing things. It is still nice to see. Some of these titles even come with quality of life changes, such as a rewind feature or save states. Good Old Games themselves are running an initiative to make these older games playable on newer hardware, ensuring that good old games are still playable to people, no matter what hardware they are running. Along with this, they fight to get previously delisted games back on their store, like what happened with Alpha Protocol, a 360 PS3 era game that, while yes, has its issues, is still great fun to play. A more recent example of older games getting re-released would be the original Resident Evil trilogy, all working out the box on new hardware thanks to GOG. And at this current moment in time, they're the only company that are selling the original trilogy. Sony do have the first game available, however, on their PS Store. Before, you can only download the game if you had premium, not buy it, but Sony have changed this recently. Good Old Games also have games that Steam themselves refuse to publish, including several visual novels like the fantastic Chaos Head. Steam has said that the content is not allowed on their store, but if you look on what's being sold right now, you can see that there are some games that look far worse than what Chaos Head have. Even if the game gets censored to release on Steam, they can just say, sometimes close to release, that the game is not a good fit for them, which is a major blow to these games. It generally feels like, with visual novels especially, Steam has a very antagonistic stance against them. However, GOG seem to be welcoming of these, and they're usually my go-to place when I'm after visual novels. It just seems disappointing to see Valve, a company that is usually highly regarded in the PC game space, drop the ball when it comes to this, and act in a way that I think is not only anti-consumer but anti-developer as well, especially when you look at what games they do sell on there. Sex appeal of anybody? Either way, even when companies do try to stop games from being released or stop games from being preserved, fans and other companies do help pick up the slack. So, at the end of the day, if things seem hopeless, don't think that there's nothing you can do. As people often say, be the change you want to see. Hey guys, a bit of a different video than usual. I was working on the Christmas Nights video, but the news about Sega delisting the original game kind of prompted me into action. There will be a link for the Stop Killing Games initiative below, as well as links to how to get games like Outrun, Silent Hill and Sonic R running on modern systems. As usual, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing, it helps out a lot. Can't believe we've almost doubled what my original goal was, you guys are fantastic. And be sure to follow me on both Twitter and Blue Sky. But for now, I'll go back into the video editing mines to get the Christmas Nights video out, hopefully before Christmas. Otherwise, it'll just be New Year night. And yeah, happy holidays. Hope you all have a fantastic day, and I'll see you next time. Bye.